Hello everybody, Coach Al here. Thanks for joining me. The topic today, how to sit on your bike. I first became aware of this riding with some other athletes, talking to them about this idea, and then when I was in South Bend as well, riding with that elite group of juniors and young pros, and very different positions on the bike for all of them. Now if you recall, one of the purposes of those two new exercises that I've shared with you is to stabilize and strengthen the entire hip girdle in a way that really matches what we want to do in a very sport-specific way. So that anterior tilt and hip hinge position, a very sport-specific position to be in. One of the reasons why those two exercises are so effective is that they reinforce this idea of what I think of as the thoracolumbar cylinder. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today as it relates to how to sit on the bike, because one of the most important ways in which we maintain control of our core, motor control, stability, and just stabilize through this whole area is through intra-abdominal pressure. One of the ways that we control that pressure is maintaining integrity of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor, and the fact, remembering that these two things, sort of the top and bottom of this cylinder, which is our thorax, our trunk, that they move together and that everything here really needs to be balanced. This is where we create control, and of course breathing is an important part of that. When we get ourselves onto a bike, what we want to do is we want to maintain integrity of our trunk and this entire thoracolumbar cylinder. Just like in these exercises, if we can create enough little anterior tilt and then hip hinge so that this remains intact, we're going to create some really good, effective, authentic control of this entire thorax, this entire trunk. And this is the position that we want to be in our bikes, where we allow for the hip to hinge. We're not bending at the waist, and we keep everything in a very authentic and effective way where there's balance between this diaphragm and pelvic floor. And of course, the error that some cyclists make is that they allow for a posterior tilt to occur. So they end up sitting on the bike as they come down into position. Instead of being in a hip hinge, they go the opposite way and they come down this way. So they end up with a rounded back and a posterior tilted position this way, which basically allows you to sit sort of flat on the saddle, but over time, this puts a lot of stress on the low back, because essentially the low back kind of thinks we're falling over. We've lost this integrity of this thoracolumbar cylinder. So we've got to create that nice little anterior tilt and hip hinge, get ourselves on the bike this way. And of course, this is, whether you're on the mountain bike, on a road bike, this is your attack position, which again loads up eccentrically the hip, keeps the integrity of this entire thorax or trunk, allows for really effective breathing and effective control. And of course, that's the opposite of this position, which is a posterior tilt, puts a lot of pressure on the low back, incidentally stretches the psoas even more, interestingly, and just a bad position to be in. Of course, the key to being able to sit correctly on the bike is to have the right bike saddle, because you'll put more pressure on the soft tissue area, there's no doubt about it. And so, as many of you know, the key is having the right kind of saddle that gives you the space in the room and removes pressure and allows you to sit in that position and get good support without any unnecessary discomfort.